Welcome to the Magdalene Voices, giving voice to those silent for centuries through sacred conversations with beautiful, illuminating souls. I am your host, Mariaestela. Today I am joined by Lyna Rose. Lyna is a writer, mystic, and a mother who just spent a year in Provence to study Mary Magdalene and to finish her book titled 52 Prayers to Enlighten Your Daily Life, which is out in spring 2018. In this sacred conversation, Lyna and I dive into what drove her to uproot herself and her two daughters and move to the southern France. We also talk about Lyna's divinely guided journey, her experiences with Mary Magdalene, and healing. As always, I invite you to take only what serves you and leave the rest. Here is our sacred conversation. Lyna, welcome to the Magdalene Voices. I am, as always, thrilled that you are here. And I think my very first question, or I know that my very first question is going to be, what on earth made you uproot your New York life, not only you, but also your two daughters' life, and move across the ocean to the south of France?
Yes, it's, honestly, I think that I had to be just a little bit insane to make that move. And to be quite honest with you, if I had known what it had entailed, I might not have done it. So about 3 years ago, I went to a friend's painting class, and her name is Carol Tomasi, and she teaches intentional creativity, where you meditate and you really connect with the muse, and then you paint prayer, you write down prayers on the canvas and your intention. So I came to her home one day to finish my painting, and she had paintings of Mary Magdalene, of the goddess Hathor, of other really beautiful figures of the sacred feminine. Mm-hmm. Now, just to backtrack a little bit, my personal spiritual journey had always been really close to Yeshua, to Jesus. I grew up Catholic and I became Mormon, and then I became a student and a teacher of A Course in Miracles. So for me, it was always Jesus oriented. Mm-hmm. I knew who Mary Magdalene was, but I just thought, okay, whatever, didn't really resonate with me at the time. And one morning when I showed up at my friend's house and I saw all her beautiful paintings, the sacred feminine, she said, well, Mary Magdalene is here for you. And I thought, okay, what does that mean? Whatever. I mean, it's nice to know, but there was no connection yet. And after that, I began to really feel an inner pull towards learning about her life, who she really was, and it really became a journey of discovering who Mary Magdalene was for the year after that. And also, experiencing coincidences and mystical experiences. Mm-hmm. So 6 months after that, my ex-husband got a job in Hong Kong. Okay. And I thought, okay, so now I'm by myself raising my two daughters in New York City. Mm-hmm. I felt guided to move to France. I also had a family member who was really sick at the time. And I thought, if I move to France, I'll be able to kind of focus on my book, raise my two daughters, help my family member. And then 3 months after making that decision, I was guided to move to Provence, the south of France, where she lived. Yeah. So for those who might not be familiar with the story, in about 44 AD, Mary Magdalene with Lazarus and Martha and other members of Jesus' really close circle arrived in southern France in a little village called Marie-de-la-Mer in a little boat. And Lazarus became the first bishop of Marseille, actually. Mary Magdalene went up east towards Saint-Baume along a Roman highway at the time. Yeah. And then Saint Martha went up to Tarragon. So Mary, according to the local legends, spent the rest of her life, about 30 years, and in a cave in the middle of the mountains in the Saint-Baume range, and just prayed, meditated, did a lot of healing, and that's where she spent the last of her life until she took one more communion with Saint Maximin, who was a priest at the time, and that's where she passed. Mm-hmm. So I decided to move near Aix-en-Provence, which is about 45 minutes from her cave. So for this past year, I just moved back to the States 2 weeks ago. Yeah. But what I would do, I would go once a week and spend a day with Mary, sometimes twice a week. But I would drop off my daughters and go up and spend a day and meditate and pray in her forest, which is the most magical place on earth.
Nice. Wow. That's amazing.
So yeah, it was really, now, thanks to A Course in Miracles, actually, and A Course in Miracles, it's a thought training system that reconnects you with your inner guidance, your inner wisdom, that trains you to think along the line of love, of Godhood, in a sense, if you will. So that really has helped me reconnect with my inner wisdom. So now I know that when I am meant to do something, when, the Holy Spirit or God or the universe, whatever term you relate to, whatever I'm getting to, I just know, and it stays with me.
Yeah.
So that desire and that calling to really learn and to learn from her,
yeah,
was really deep. And I followed that, because now I know that when you follow that inner voice, when you follow that guidance, doors will open, but you have to show up first, and you have to be the first one making the leap, if you will.
I understand. Yeah. Yeah. So how does she, so you arrived in the southern France, and then you decided to do this once a week, go up into her forest and her cave.
Right.
How did she, what did you discover, first of all? Because I know you went to, I stalked you on Instagram, so I know that you went to a bunch of places. It was like, for me, it was like, where has she gone now, and what has she discovered now? And I wonder, like, what have you seen? What have you discovered in the southern side of France?
I can cry it. I think that for me, I had to go on a pilgrimage to the south of France to learn that the most important journey that we can ever take is the one within ourselves. So it was really, although geographically, I traveled many miles, but I was really, for the first time in my life, able to dive within after a pretty traumatic experience. So a year before moving to France, I was in contact with some old Templars who were teaching spiritual techniques. And a lot of it was amazing. I mean, really kind of shifted my energy and my vibration really quickly, and really helped me feel a bit more light within, because at the end of the day, what Jesus taught, from my understanding, was enlightenment. And enlightenment means to turn the light on and to fill ourselves up with so much light. So yes, also from the level of the mind, but also from a physical perspective, where we become beings of light from within. So I was learning those techniques. They were, amazing. And again, I was not really learning from anyone else at the time, because I thought it was all from within me, but those techniques were legit. And at some point, I met with one of the teachers, and I'm sharing this story because that was really kind of the last experience that really forced me to go within and not rely on any other systems of wisdom, if you will, or techniques. So the last day with that teacher, I shared my experiences that once in a while I really felt that I was guided by Jesus, just as when I wrote my book of prayers, like I know that it was from him. And then he said to ask me questions like, what do you mean? You should hear Jesus, and then you cry because you miss him. I'd share with him that once in a while I feel really deep grief for Jesus, and I miss him and I long for him. And then pretty much all of a sudden he kind of turned pretty dark and really made me feel like I was possessed, and there was something wrong with me because I felt so much sadness and so close to Jesus, and I should never really hear his voice or feel his presence, and that was a sign that I was possessed. So then he called his guru, and it was another country at the time, and then said, well, that's stuck in you, there's nothing you can do, you're lost, and no matter how powerful we are, we're not going to be able to help you, so you need to take me back to the train station tomorrow morning. And that was it. And until the next morning, he really treated me like I was something really scary. And I could not remember the last time my soul felt so crushed and rejected and ashamed. So I dropped him off at the train station. He didn't even say a word to me. And I was guided to go to Marie-de-la-Mer, which is a beautiful little beach town where Mary Magdalene landed, to cleanse myself. And I meditated on the beach, and her presence is so strong on that beach, and over the ocean. It's beautiful. It's so powerful. If any of you ever gone a pilgrimage to southern France, it has to be one of the spots for you to experience. And after that, I thought, never again will I ever allow my soul to be exposed to such a treatment. Yeah. And after that, I really began to tune into like an inner stream of consciousness, of wisdom, and things that I receive, I know are not from my own conscious mind. So it's it was really good to share that experience, because I think it's happened to many and could happen, and I needed it. It was like the final, okay, you're gonna turn within or what? Are you still relying on external wisdom and techniques?
Yeah.
No. So.
I feel called to share that, I have had personal experiences of grief involving Yeshua as well. And I've been very, very surprised by them, because it seems so out of this world. And in this, in this day and age, it's like, how can you feel such a sadness for something that happened, 20 or not 20, but 2,000 years ago. So I want to share that you're not alone in your grief. And I think that many of us are feeling that grief. And I think it comes up, and that's what comes to me right now, is that comes up in order for us to heal it, to basically heal it, because it was. And I know that at the time, a lot of Yeshua's followers were not allowed to show that grief. Right. We weren't allowed to display that kind of grief, because basically he was being crucified for being a rebel. And if you showed any kind of, belonging to him, or acknowledgement of him, you risk you're being killed as well. And I know that his followers, the task for those who were his followers were to go out into the world and spread his message. And had we, or those who they were, been killed, then that would not we couldn't have done that. His message would not have been shared in the way that it has been, had those been killed. So I just want to honor you for sharing your story. And it's a beautiful moment of realizing, even though, we sometimes as human are being brought to very dark places, but there's a wisdom in those places. And it's not about just, going, you can only go through them, I would say.
Right.
So beautiful. So you entered into this, you call it a stream of consciousness, and understanding that your inner teacher and your inner guidance is what you needed to follow. Well, basically that's a message for all of us, that we have to go within. We can't rely on external forces. So I have this image of you being cleansed at the beach on Saint Baume.
No, it was
So what did you do the next day? What happened the next day after that?
So after that, so I just felt also like compelled to share, for those for those who don't really know how to go within yet, who feel like they try and they get distracted. What really helped me is actually I bought a journal, and then I would just ask a question, and invite, my higher self or Mary Magdalene, or and I would ask a question, and I would pray, and then things started to come. So after a few months, I didn't really need this medium, or that I would write everything down, because I would forget right away. It's like it's not really from my logical mind. So if I don't write it down, I forget. But it comes, it comes through, and then I write it down. But that is such a helpful way to start, because although I knew of the concept of going within for many years, concretely it did not really happen until like maybe 3 or 4 years later. So like a journal is really helpful.
Beautiful. I love journaling.
Yes.
I have an addiction to journals. I can't go into a store without just like
buying them. So what after that? So to answer your question, what I discovered was that she was a wisdom bearer, a teacher of wisdom, a teacher of the way, and that she was really aware of that calling from a young child. Obviously we all know, not all know, that's a problem, not all, that she was not a prostitute. And if you actually look at the Greek term in the Gospels that mention her as being a prostitute, the term actually is used to define someone who transgresses Jewish law.
Yes. Not
prostitute, not a whore. So it could have been someone who didn't pay the taxes, or who like did something in the Sabbath that we're not supposed to.
Yeah.
So it's taken almost 2,000 years, and now she's been raised as the apostle.
Yes. Which is very interesting.
But still, I had lunch So at the foot of a mountain, there's a lovely little cafe that serves amazing food. And whenever I would, go up there, I would usually kind of stop and have lunch there. So I was talking with two American pilgrims that come, and lovely, lovely people. It was so nice for me to hear English. I'm very Americans, and tried to talk about Mary Magdalene and why I was there. And towards the end, they said, well, the fact that she was, a prostitute helps a lot of women because we can come back from sin and so I said, well, actually that's not quite true. If you really look at the Bible and the translations, that's not true. And she said, well, I follow the Bible. And so then after that, it was my child was like, I could either, reflect the love and beauty of her soul right there, or try to prove her wrong, and that would not have been an act of love. So I chose, the first option. Yeah. But again, there's still so much not retraining, but really embodiment of the truth of who she was, a teacher of love, a teacher of wisdom. And she was really dedicated to her calling. She was Mary the Magdalene. It was actually a title of wisdom. She was the tower of the flock. She was the tower of Zion. Yeah. And she been prepared for that from a very early age. I believe that she went to at least 2 different temples and mystery schools. Yes. She was so wise and really well trained, and she would not have let anything get in the way of who she was. Also because of her family lineage as well. She bore a really high responsibility towards her family. Yeah,
I completely agree, and I think that it's interesting that the church, or the Catholic Church, they actually retracted their statement about her being a prostitute many years ago, and now, as you say, she's become the apostle of the apostles, and that, but she's still in the Bible. She's still being, that hasn't changed. So that's basically right. It goes out. I had a friend, a very dear friend, a couple of weeks ago, where we had a conversation, and I told him about Mary Magdalene and how she was not, and he said, but does it matter, because Jesus or Yeshua loved her anyway? Right. Does it matter that that she was called a prostitute and a sinner and a whore, when she in fact was a priestess, a master teacher, and on her way to her ascension? Yes, it does matter. It doesn't matter, not only to me, but to the way that we view the divine feminine in the world, and that's where that's why I see the world is where it's at right now, because it's so needed. So to me, yes, it matters, because millions across the globe are Christians or Catholics, and a lot of Christians are finding their religion lacking, and I believe that to be the reason. I believe it because the patriarchy has subdued and minimalized and scorned women and femininity, or feminine, and not only within women. It's basically the divine feminine lives within both men and women, and if we're not being called to balance those, and if we're not being called to work with both of those, then my personal belief is that we then descend into the shadow aspects of those. We cannot live without those. So what happened next? How did you, so you go there every week, and I imagine, I don't know, and this is a question for you, how did your experience with her deepen? How do you work with her? I'm not going to ask you today yet, because I still want to stay in France and hear what goes on there. So how did your relationship with her evolve through those stages?
So I feel like it was like themes, for example, so I would drive up there and start walking through a forest, and for maybe 10 minutes I'll just be walking and really kind of trying to empty my mind. It's so strange to share that, because it's so intimate. I haven't shared it yet, but this is, literally what happened. People will recognize it as truth for themselves or not. It does not, it's not matter. It does not matter, because it was beautiful too that recently I've really been understanding that there's no right or wrong as far as spirituality. I think that there are aspects and principles that a soul needs that might not be true for me, like for example, I was Mormon for 10 years, and so there was some threads of truth that I could only recognize through that thought system. But anyway, so I would walk and empty my mind, and then I would have a theme that would come up, words that would come up in my mind kind of out of nowhere, and then would kind of go along that tangent. So for example, one day I remember it became really clear that I had to come back to the earth to really heal myself. Yeah. In a sense, and the importance of the energies from the earth, and how the feminine kind of uses, those gifts and those energies to heal herself, while the masculine pulls it from above. Yeah. And as we bring those together, it becomes a Merkaba and a healing space and a complete human being.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So, or now that it would be like the mother wound, that I had to heal, because again, so the repression and the shaming of Mary Magdalene is hugely symbolic of the shaming of our own feminine power of our womb, and of sex being shameful and sexuality being repressed and shamed. And until we heal that wound, the archetype or shadow and shame, we're not going to rest and stand in our power as women, because I really learned that my womb was really the center of my light and of my power, of my wisdom, of my confidence, and of my love as well. And until we heal that mother wound, because our mother is really the first example, the first archetype through which we perceive femininity, then there are going to be blocks, and that's going to manifest itself in relationships, in our work, and everything else. And I had no idea before, was
so how like she was so it sounds like she was actually teaching you, like she was, and the thing that comes up for me is there is an allowing from your part, right? But there is an allowing of this to happen, because the first thing, I know that was how it was for me in the beginning, was like, you want me to do what? It's like, because of the logic mind, and kind of this is much of this is not logic. Very often it's not logic. But what I've found is that when you surrender, or when I step out of the way, things seems to to happen very, very quickly. They seem to go very smoothly. They're better.
Right.
Were there any particular, now you've mentioned the mother wound, healing the mother wound, and you've also mentioned, I'm not sure what the first thing you mentioned was, but were there other particular themes? Because I know you were there for a year, and how did it deepen, if it did?
I mean, there's so much, and I've got literally a whole book of it.
Good.
I think for me, it was, as you said, and I feel like I need to bring it up, is to trust. So although at first it was maybe just a few words or a few sentences, and there's actually a story I'm going to share with you that was just an example of that. So on my way to the grotto, to her cave, there was really an old church from the 12th century. And I would always see it, and I'm like, I need to go see it at some point. So one morning I took the time, I'm like, okay, I'm going to stop and see it. And it was empty, and it was actually a church that had been built by Knight Templars.
Oh.
Yes, exactly. And as I was sitting in that church, I meditated, and I was guided to learn more about the whole concept of anointment.
Yeah. Yes.
And what it means to become anointed, and to be a watchtower and all of that. And at some point I received the guidance to anoint myself with the oil of love. I know, and I didn't know what I meant. And then I received the guidance to go to a little store called the Voice of the Angel at Saint-Maximin. So Saint-Maximin is the little town where her basilica is. It's about 30 minutes from the cave, and that's where there is her skull in the crypt underneath the basilica that was deposited there, I want to say, around the 9th century. Okay. So that was, I want to say, around May. So by then I knew that whenever I received guidance that was so clear, I had to do it. Yeah. So I drive up to Saint-Maximin, to that little store. I opened the door, and right on display were bottles of nard oil. And for those who don't know what nard oil is, that's the oil that Mary Magdalene used to anoint Jesus. And this is it here.
Nice.
And I didn't know that they sold it there. I didn't know that I could buy nard. So I bought it, and that's something that I use often in my meditations or whenever I do healings of any type. So again, it was like, if I hadn't trusted that, I wouldn't have been able to receive the proof that my guidance was true. And later on,
as far as I remember from the Bible, and I haven't read the Bible, so I'm just because this is what I remember being read somewhere. That is actually also the oil that that was partly to the reason why she was actually called a whore, or a prostitute, is because at the time that oil was very, very expensive, and only, it was the price. There's a piece where someone, I think it's Judas, who say, why didn't she sell it, and we could have used it, and so forth. And the answers so okay, go ahead. Sorry.
It's free. And then Jesus said, well, once when I die, you will have your money, you will have everything, but you will not have me for much longer. So that was, and it has a really particular scent.
Yeah.
And 2 months later, I went to Vézelay. So there are 3 sites in France that hold her relics. Yeah. There's Saint-Maximin, the Basilica. There's her cave. And there's Vézelay, which is a little town in Burgundy. That's a pilgrimage site as well. And I went there. And there's it's just a beautiful crypt and really ancient Gothic, beautiful basilica. And I go down the steps, stop at the gate. There was almost like a gold gate in front of her relics. And I began to smell nard. And I'm like, out of nowhere. And the only reason why I knew it was nard, because I had bought it at the store like a month before that. So just these experiences really began to just build on top of another.
Yeah.
Confirming that wisdom.
Yeah.
Was to be trusted.
I'm wondering, because you're originally French, so I'm wondering what part does that? I know you're French American, but you were I think you were born in France, right?
Yes.
And so I'm wondering what part, or if any, did France or did that play any part for you? I think maybe I'm paraphrasing or putting words in your mouth, but it sounds to me like you would have gone anyway. But how do you see that you were actually born in France, being part of this?
Well, it's funny because I felt that so there are some grounds that do hold energies, and I think that's why so many feel called to Saint-Baume, and I think that's why there's such a powerful attraction and amazing experiences you will have when you go to a forest, because the presence is still in that forest and those grounds and those trees, because everything is energy, and her energy is still very much so there. Nice. So France is really sacred, a lot of mystical stories and legend and presence in those lands, and it's not something I realized before, because for me, before, spirituality was always on an intellectual level. I moved to the States when I was 20 years old. I was really religious, and there were a few years during my teenage years when I considered entering a religious order, but I was never really connected to the heartbeat of the land itself. But I guess speaking the language helped me, and I always knew that at some point I would retire in the south of France and I would move there, and which I think I will. Honestly, between I think when I get really old, I will finish my life, hopefully. I mean, who knows, maybe I'll die in a freak accident, but I will finish my life near Saint-Baume, near her mountains. So I guess that was that connection.
Yeah.
I wish, there was something more mystical I experienced as a child, but no, it was, that trip, really being in that forest and really understanding the power of the land. And again, it kind of comes back to, remember there was a meditation once I was guided to do, to really meditate almost bare skin on the ground, so that the telluric energies, the energies that make flowers and trees grow, could really almost enter my body and my being, and could be purified. I could really connect with Mother Earth on that level, and that was very powerful, and I did that for a few weeks. And it was actually a wonderful way for me to heal my womb and all the energies of my past partners, and all the ways I had defiled my own creative center.
Yeah.
And because when we defile our creative center, we're off balance.
Yeah.
We're no longer straight into our core as a woman, and as a tower of light, a tower of love, a tower of wisdom, as a tower of integrity. There's a list here. Actually, let me see if I can find it again. that I've wrote again. Everything that he is here is mostly from my meditation at St. Baume. Said the feminine joins, connects, integrates, welcomes, nourishes, nurtures, soothes, accepts, gives life, leans into herself. And unless that space that we're meant to ground ourselves into, to lean into, if it's filled with shame, with bitterness, with resentment, with wounds, there is no place for our soul to anchor itself within. Does that make sense? So really healing that is such a huge part of integrating our power and allowing ourselves to be that source of power. Because it used to be semantics for me and just concepts.
Yes.
But through personal rituals of womb cleansing and meditation, with the earth is one of them.
Those aspects that you just mentioned is what I call the shadow aspects of the feminine. So the way I see it is that we have some call it the four polarities, whereas there's the divine feminine, the divine masculine, and then they each have a shadow aspect, the shadow masculine and the shadow feminine. And the way I see it is that those shadow aspects are there to teach us a lesson, and they're there for us to heal. They're not there for us to have them go away, by suppressing or disregarding or they're actually there for us to heal and to use. And as we heal those, we come into our, as you call it, our center, and we combine the because for me it's also about it. As we heal the divine feminine and the mother wound and the wound, the shadow aspects of ourselves, we also heal them or allow for the divine feminine, or not the divine feminine, but the divine masculine to rise together with it. And I believe that believe that Yeshua embodied both his divine feminine and divine masculine qualities, and then together as a couple, they actually embodied, they were the external appearance of both, even though they both had those within. That's my personal belief. So I'm wondering how is because I also know that leaving France was difficult for you, and I can imagine it must have been after such a year of this. No, the question I want to ask is what effect, if any, did it have on your relationship with your daughters, and how did your daughters actually see this of okay, we're going to France for a year. How did that? How did they react, and how did your relationship expand or not?
Well, I think that the effect that it has had. I mean, they were able to taste the culture and the language, but I think mostly they were able to see their mom following her calling, her inner calling, with courage and not allowing fear to deter. No matter how difficult you might have seen, from external circumstances and the work that it took and the effort and doing it on your own. But that when you are called to do something, to be like a Joan of Arc and to know that you were born to do that and not allow fear or difficulties stop you. Because when you take that leap, doors will open. And the way things have fallen into place for me have been really extraordinary. Yes. So I think that long term, having that embodied in their experience, and they saw me going to her cave every week and having those experiences and sharing the stories about Jesus, and even knowing for them who Mary Magdalene was. No. I didn't know who she really was when I was, like 15 and 9. And really just being empowered and knowing that as women, we can do it on our own. It's not necessary. And I do think that ultimately the purpose is to grow in relationships. And I think that's such a beautiful gift. That you can, you can follow your heart and follow your calling, no matter how difficult it may seem.
Yeah.
And do it.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful and powerful message to give to young children and young women, especially, and young girls, especially because of the way I don't see. The thing is, I don't want to put the blame on the patriarchy. It is what it is, and it is the way it is, and it's basically up to us to change it. And I believe that we are doing that. I think that's very obvious that something is happening in the world, and that women are no longer subservient to the men, that the divine feminine is flourishing and rushing across, or simply just flowing across the globe in unseen ways. After the year was up, you had to go back you've now moved,
right?
And you're not in New York any longer. You're in Utah. How is she? If she still is she still with you? How is she with you? What is your how is your life different now than a year ago?
I'm still processing. The grief, because I really feel like I left a piece of my soul there. Yeah. But it's the gift of being able to turn within. And I think once you open the door to that inner wisdom and to that connection, it never closes unless you believe it becomes closed. So now it's my job to give up my thoughts to love and to return heaven this morning. Was really clear that it's within my cells, it's within me, no matter what. And even as God, we think sometimes that if we don't behave a certain way, or if we sin, He's moving away, but He's never moving away. We're the ones moving away from it. Yeah. And for me, the ability to really go within, and something keeps coming up, so I have to share. Go ahead. And that was so pivotal in my spirituality, was to go back within my body. So I mentioned I was a student teacher of A Course in Miracles, which I love. I love my course. But for me, the second part of my healing journey was, instead of seeing the body as something that's not real, it was really clear to me this past year that I had to go back within my body in order to integrate all the pain, limiting beliefs, and wounds that I had accumulated over 3 decades. And unless I was going back fully into my body, I was not going to be able to integrate everything, because what we resist, what we make wrong, it becomes insurmountable. And that's why there are so many people, I think, in our spiritual community say, well, doing this, I'm doing all those workshops, the course, but there's still pain within me, and I don't know how to get rid of it. So you have to come back into your body and feel it fully, because what we resist, we cannot overcome, we cannot integrate. And the purpose of spirituality is to remember who we are and to integrate everything into the light, so that we can become enlightened from within. It's integration, not repression.
Yes. I'm sitting here trying not to go, yes!
I know, right? It was like a huge aha moment for me. And again, I wouldn't have been able, and that's part of the feminine, right? It's the body, the soul in a sense is feminine, but the spirit is masculine. It impregnates our body with the seed that is our soul, that's connected to the divine, and the body is the vessel. Yeah. And it's a sacred vessel.
Yes. For me, it was a lot. For me, the whole body thing, I completely agree with. We have to come back into the body, and I struggled for a long time with this. I've had some experiences where I had a near-death experience at the age of 11. So from a very early age, I knew that this was not everything there is. I knew that there was something else, and the experience I have was that place is not, it wasn't so much a place as it was a sensation or a feeling, and it was it's so undescribable. It goes beyond anything I've ever experienced. Like I would say that I have it at times. I do have it when I'm in deep meditation. There's this space where it's just like everything just dissolves, and it's such a, not a hap, but like it's just content and satisfaction and fulfilling in ways that it's very difficult to describe. And knowing that for a long time, I was like, fuck this shit. I don't want this body. I don't want to be here. I just want to go there. I'd rather be there. So I was trying to get there, as you say, with my mind. I was trying to get there. But what I realized, that, as you say, is that you have to you have to feel it in order to heal it. So it has to come through you, because it's through us that the divine works, and we're here to, as you say, be the light. Sorry, you had something?
Yeah, no, it's good. Yeah, something came up. You must have felt it, because it's but you can finish. That's fine.
No, it's so it's as I said, we have to feel it in order to feel it, and for me, one of the things is that there's no way out. It's through, and I see that we are here to embody the divine that we are, no matter how we see it. We are, and how we choose not to see it. We are the divine, and as you also know, of Course in Miracles has been imperative for me in my personal journey as well, and I know that it is for millions of people across the globe. But there is, and that's not. I don't think that's only in A Course in Miracles. I think that's very normal, or at least that's my experience is with a lot of as you say, spiritual works, is that. And I can understand why we would not want to go here, because it's dark and it's deep, and it's not, I say that those who think that, spirituality is easy and just all about, light and love is just you haven't done the work yet, because it's this is not, I always say it's not for those faint at heart, because you've got to be willing to face, your darkest demons and like you say, limiting beliefs and just muck that you have to, but I also believe that when we go through it, and there is a I wouldn't say reward, but it's just there's a peace there that just is and I don't have that all the time, but I do experience it from time to time. So what now? What's next? How are you? I love how you say that she's with you, and if there's one thing I hear in everything that you've said, is that, and it's a crucial piece that I feel that it's important to mention to the viewers and the listeners, is that it's an internal practice, and that that it's about your inner guidance and inner teacher. Nothing can ever tell you. And even, I want to say that even those who are listening to this, make sure that you check with your inner guidance and your inner teacher. Take what serves you and leave the rest, and then perhaps come back and listen again. Or I know that it seeds something in you, and maybe it's supposed to sprout now or never, or maybe it doesn't, but it is always, I do that with, clients, everyone I work with, is make sure that I am not the guru, and you are the guru, and it's important that you learn to listen to what is true for you, because it may not be what's true for me, and that's okay. Yeah. So where are you? So what's going, how are you working with that?
Well, so I just barely settled. So I just arrived in this place actually 2 weeks ago. Yeah. For the past few days, I feel like I've been able to kind of breathe again and reconnect, because I had so many, really so many material, challenges that I really had to tend to create, a new life and a new beginning for my daughter. But I think for me, if I had to choose what I would teach, I had a beautiful, my dream would be to teach others to really let go of all of their spiritual tools. Although I think during the early stages of our spiritual journey, I think we do need those tools and those teachers to lean on. But at some point, in order to do the real healing work and to ground the divine in this earth, meaning through our body, rather than trying to ignore our body and stay in the ether. And that was me before. I would try to get away from my body in my real life as much as I could, and that manifested itself in bills that I didn't want to pay, or it was just the reality that I didn't want to face. But by not facing reality, we don't get to shift our reality, and we don't get to participate in the evolution of life here. So I would love to actually just teach how to go within, and I know it might sound paradoxical, but I know that it can be done. So even maybe one workshop or lecture, or how to really go within, because whenever I would detour or defer to someone else's wisdom, I could feel my power diluting and my self-esteem, and it would just become diluted. You know, that's really kind of the best imagined word I can use. But also know that it sounds so much easier than it is, but it's a practice. So I think at some point I will probably start giving lectures. I used to give lectures back in New York. Let me show you something. I started to also study her gospel, and actually I'm going to read a passage. So that's the Gospel of Mary, Mary Magdalene. It's pretty short, but it's filled with them, and there's a passage here that I particularly love. So that's the Savior's farewell, when, you know, he is telling his apostles, well, you know, goodbye, I'll be back, I'll be with you until the end of times. So this is what he's saying from Mary's writings. When the Blessed One had said these things, he greeted them all. Peace be with you, he said. Acquire my peace within yourselves. And then this is where we have to be mindful. Be on your guard so that no one deceives you by saying, look over here or look over there. For the child of true humanity exists within you. Follow it. Those who search for it will find it. So whether that is the Christ child, whether that is the Christ itself, the higher self, you know, the Holy Spirit, that, you know, it's funny because it was beautiful. I remember seeing, sorry, it just came up, but I was downstairs in her cave, and I remember being shown the soul as a majestic pearl. It was a pretty big pearl, but it literally had the luminescence and the glow of a pearl. And if we began to see that within ourselves, even during meditation, trying to visualize that, and also trying to visualize it within every single person and trying to connect to that pearl, that soul, then everyone, I know this world would change drastically, and we would remember who we really are. Because I think that's also the other reason why I had to go to southern France, to remember who I really was. And again, I think that's one of the most, that's our purpose in this world. Yes, grounding the divine and bringing love, but our number one purpose is to remember who we really are, because then everything will flow forth from that.
Beautiful.
You know? To who are you? We forget. Even this morning, I'm going to read you. She said this morning, sorry guys, I was not planning on reading this.
Go ahead.
You forget too easily who you are. It's time for you to remember who you are as, anyway, because I'm living it. And even me, I mean, I had those experiences, incredible experiences, and I still forget because we get caught in daily life. So I do have my altar, you know, what has helped me too, and it's where I'm all the stones. So I believe that, you know, stones they can hold vibration and energy, and that's why a lot of the ancient rites and rituals were done in caves. That's why she spent a lot of time in her grotto, in her cave, and she, you know, they would do like, people would come up to her to heal and for wisdom, and she would teach them if they came up to her, and they would have bonfires and teach them under fire, but she had to use the power of stones and to hold those energies and to have them reflect them back to her in a sense of really powerful, if that makes sense. So
absolutely,
I have several stones that I brought back from her cave because I know it carries certain frequencies. I'm not big into crystals, but for some reason so I'll put them around me when I meditate, and it brings me back to that space. So I have an altar that I go back to. I try to sit in front of every single day, because again, it brings me back to that space so that I can feel like I can go within much faster in a sense. So that's part of the daily practice, to remember who we are, and we can only do that when we're training within rather than facing the world.
Beautiful, Lyna. Thank you so much for sharing. I think our time is up because we've already gone over what I thought we would go over. I want to ask you, is there anything you feel we haven't, or is anything coming up for you that you want to share?
As women, it's so important that we descend back into our holy space, into our womb, into our power, and to really descend into it, meaning meditation and massages as well, massages of the womb, And even sometimes what I'll do in meditation is that I really will visualize my womb center, my creative center full of pink light. I think that it's so clearing, and that it's also kind of bonds, like allows me to bond with that part of myself. And then I feel really grounded and powerful, and magnetic as well. There's that little center, that's our center of magnetism as women, and that's so powerful. And it's also the center of compassion for others and other for ourselves. So now when I'm connected to that center, I feel so much more compassion. I have more space within myself to accept what life wants from me, and to accept whatever it is, so that I can remember who I really am. So just to keep descending into that space, and you'll be guided. You'll receive teachers and books until you can finally just do it on your own.
Absolutely. I know for a fact that's true, because one of the reasons I'm sitting here with this show and podcast is because teachers and guides were brought to me. I want to share that you were part of that journey, because you posted a photo on Instagram that I can't find for some reason, but that led me to discover some books, and it led me, and that kind of catapulted my whole journey in this. So Lyna, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for having joined with me in this sacred conversation. I am sure, and I know that this will touch those who's it's supposed to touch, and those who feel called to have come will have been here, whether it be tomorrow, or next year, or in years from now. So thank you, Lyna, and I want to say God bless you.
No, thank you for having me.
That is what we have for you in today's episode of the Magdalene Voices. I hope it served you well. If you are listening to this via podcast, know that you can go to my website, Mariaestela.com. That's Mariaestela.com for all of the deeds and the details. Finally, I hope you will take a moment to either leave us a comment or review, and share it with your friends on social media. God bless.